Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday, July 24th, 2024 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take roll?
Yes, Commissioner Boyd, Commissioner Chapin,
Present.
Commissioner Denault,
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks, Commissioner Lapine, Commissioner Overby,
Here.
Commissioner Williams,
Here.
Vice Chair Wagner, Chair Sullivan.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Denault. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Brings us on to approval of the minutes from the July 10th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion? Moved by Commissioner Overby,
Support.
seconded by Commissioner Williams. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Brings us on to committee reports. I don't see anything written on the agenda, but do we want to give an update on the comprehensive master plan meeting?
Certainly. Let's see, since the last Planning Commission meeting on July 10th, we had a public health focused, comprehensive plan activities. We're updating our comprehensive plan right now, and July was Public Health Month. So on July 15th, we had a panel made up of 4 public health experts that were speaking at lunch, 11:30 to 1 o'clock, right here in Hannah. Those were the Chief Medical Officer Adenike Shoyinka from Ingham County. Chief Health Officer of Clinton County is Liz Braddock, and also Jesse Jones and Angela Precht from the Michigan Public Health Institute. I thought it was a really good panel, and it was well attended, and I think it was very well received. Immediately following that panel discussion, we had a age-friendly community session, which is generally intended for older adults, and so our seniors group, we had a meeting down at prime time and discussed the public hearing panel in some more detail, public health panel in more detail. And then that evening at Pat Church Park, we had a workshop that was also well attended. It was a nice opportunity to check out the park and discuss how parks and other active recreation opportunities can affect public health. We're very excited to have August coming up, which will be Climate Month. I should mention that the Comprehensive Plan Committee actually met today, just before this meeting. Our 3 representatives, Commissioners Sullivan, Overby, and Denault, were all present. And essentially that coordinating committee meets monthly to make sure that we're sort of on track and to take news about the Comprehensive Plan update back to their constituencies, the groups that they represent and work with, and also to bring feedback from those groups back to us. So that took place this evening. Our next activity in August, again, which is Climate Resilience Month, on August 19th, 11:30 to 1. We believe it will be at the library, but we're just finalizing that today and tomorrow. August 19th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock will be author Danielle Aragoni, who is the author of the book Climate Resilience for an Aging Nation. Really timely and very well suited for our comprehensive plan update, especially with our age-friendly group. So we'll be having a talk from her at 11:30, and then immediately afterwards we'll have another talk-back session with the age-friendly communities group. On August 21st, that's a Wednesday, in the evening we'll also have another workshop talking about climate resilience, and that will be outdoors. That will be at Pat Church Park again in the pavilion. So we'll have a great opportunity to experience some August heat and talk about how can we mitigate these effects with our comprehensive plan process. So that's basically where we're at right now with the comprehensive plan update. The other committees that we have commissioners represented on are the Age-Friendly Communities Committee of the Seniors Commission. Commissioner Chapin was able to attend the last discussion, which focused on rental licensing, as far as I'm aware. And then in September, we're going to be sending that committee the 2020 adopted age-friendly work plan, to review before the next meeting in September, because the age-friendly group is doing an update of their work plan sort of concurrently with the comprehensive plan update. And then finally, we had a mass timber study committee that you're aware of. Again, Commissioner Chapin was able to represent the commission on that. And we'll be talking about that committee's recommendations from their work this evening at the public hearing for zoning ordinance amendments that are related to mass timber and other green building methods. So we've had some busy committees by our commissioners, and I think the most active right now is the comprehensive plan committee. I'll be sure to bring you a full report next month as well. So, any questions from any commissioners about anything that I've mentioned?
Seeing no questions, thank you, Mr. Bartley.
Thank you.
Appreciate the updates. Brings us on to item number 3, staff reports. So I'll leave it with you.
My major staff report is to say that we've just hired an intern, Hannah Prinz. We're very happy to have her starting. She just started on Monday. Hannah, some of you may actually recognize her when she comes to planning commission meetings because she was a member of the MSU urban planning practicum team that did our student engagement work for the comprehensive plan update in spring semester of 2024 at MSU. That was a really good report, and you might recall from April their presentation about that's certainly going to inform our comprehensive plan work. So we recognized Hannah as a very good worker. She applied for our internship, and we were very glad to accept her, and so she started, and she'll be with us until the end of the calendar year. And I also want to mention that I, as well as the city manager and some other executive staff, will be attending the Big Ten City Leaders meeting in Ann Arbor. There are actually a few going there tonight. I'll be going tomorrow. But that's essentially a forum for Big Ten cities to get together as staff and management and sort of compare and contrast. Maybe I won't say commiserate, but certainly understand what we're all going through and where we can learn from each other. So that's going on now. I don't think I have anything else from the staff report. So thank you.
Great. Thank you again. Takes us on to item number 4, commissioner announcements. Are there any? Looked like you were going to have one over there, but
No.
all right.
Just happy to be here, I guess.
We're all happy you're here. Yeah, we have quorum now.
Apologize.
Takes us on to item number 5, communications from citizens. I didn't see any written communications in tonight's agenda packet, so that takes us on to verbal from the audience. So again, I'll say the kind of the standard instructions are keep your comments to 5 minutes if possible. If you're here to talk about an item on tonight's agenda for a public hearing, it's best to wait for that item on the agenda before addressing the commission, and then please fill out your name on the card that's up there on the podium if you do come up to speak. So at this point, I have a couple cards, but I believe a lot of these are applicants. So Steve Purchase and Adam Wright, you're applicants, right?
For the next
Yeah.
public hearing.
Yeah. And then Matt Johnson for Harrier. Yeah, applicant. And then Mike Holmes for item 7.2, applicant as well. Okay, all applicants on the cards. Anybody else from the public that wishes to come forward and address the commission? All right, seeing none. Anyone online in the queue?
Can't see it. No.
All right, that was easy. So that takes us on to the public hearings portion of tonight's agenda. First item is 6.1, a public hearing by the Planning Commission to consider a site plan from Puff Puff Tobacco to construct a single-story multi-tenant retail building at 210, 218, and 224 West Lake Lansing Road. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. Just pulling this up real quick on my computer. This is the Lake Lansing project request from Aqeel Daudi to construct a single-story multi-tenant retail building. You have 3 properties, 210, 218, and 224 West Lake Lansing Road. You've seen a similar proposal to this fairly recently. The applicant had submitted a proposal to have a very similar building of approximately 6,000 square feet, single-story multi-tenants, but had proposed to have a drive-through that went around the building to the north and then to the west with a drive-through window, and has withdrawn that request. Well, I should say that request was denied earlier, but the applicant has coming back with a new request without the drive-through. So the drive-through in this district It requires the special land use review and approval by the Planning Commission. There is no drive-through, so this is a site plan review. The building is approximately 6,000 square feet. It's on the north side of Lake Lansing Road, just west of Chandler Road. A total of 42 parking spaces surrounding the building to the south and east. And the plan meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. I guess with that said, and that you're ostensibly fairly familiar with this site plan from our previous discussions, I'd like to leave it there and ask if there are any questions for me before we invite up the applicant.
Questions from commissioners? Seeing none, I think we're quite familiar with this, so I'll let the applicant come up and address the commission.
Good evening. David Christian with DC Engineering. I'm the engineer on this project here. We were here this past winter with the project. The one change we've made, as we've identified here tonight, is that we've removed the drive-through. A couple other things to bring up is, since we were here last time, one of the questions was about cutting down trees. In response to that, we hired a certified arborist to go out to the property, and the information should be in your packet, but the certified arborist went out and took a look at the trees which were growing on the property, and he found that there were really no valuable trees on the property. He found that he has native fast-growing trees, including box elder, silver maple, and mulberry. He's got some white spruce on the property. He has non-native trees, Douglas firs, spruces, Norway spruce, and an invasive tree called the tree of heaven, and I can't pronounce the Latin name, so I won't try. But at any rate, his take on it was that there was really no valuable trees on this property to be saved. And as you know, we're extensively clear-cutting the property. It's 1 acre parcel. We have a 75-foot front setback. All the trees are really towards the back. It's 3 residential properties which we assembled as a land tract for this property, for this development. And the trees basically run the property lines between the old residential lots. And that would be why we'd have so many non-native trees growing in the area. Those would have been trees which the property owners would have planted. We also had a traffic study completed, and the traffic study found that there was no impact, and now the traffic is actually going to be reduced because we've taken the drive-through out. And the drive-through really was the primary generator of traffic movements onto and off of Lake Lansing Road. We also had conversation here about so many properties being available on Lake Lansing Road being vacant. And the truth of the matter is none of the properties which are listed on Lake Lansing Road as vacant are available for retail space. There's a lot of office space available out there, but we have a significant shortage of retail space. So this is a needed use on the road corridor there. So I guess those would be my comments about it. Since I saw you last, maybe that's a little bit of new information and refresh our memories. Do you have any specific questions for me?
I have a few quick questions, but I'll defer to the commission first. Any questions? Just for clarification, so the square footage and the parking were essentially the same under this plan as they were under the previous plan. It's just the elimination of the drive-through is the only significant change made to the property?
It is the only change made to the proposed development.
Okay. Remind me, it's 4 possible retail locations, correct?
I think it's three nominally 2,000 square foot units available.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. It's the only question I had. Commissioner Chapin? Or Overby, sorry.
Thank you. Did the city council literally deny this because it had a drive-through? Was that their primary focus for denying the request?
Yes. We, the city put together a study even on where drive-throughs had been approved. They felt that without knowing the tenant for the drive-through, that a traffic study could not be accurate. We had prepared a traffic study including a drive-through, but we didn't have a name of a tenant that was going to specifically occupy that drive-through when they first opened up. So based on that and their concerns about traffic volumes there, the application was denied.
So you believe that with this change that you would still be able to accomplish what you want to with this property?
Yes. The drive-throughs make the properties more valuable, but it's still a valuable retail location. Yeah.
Thank you.
So seeing no additional questions, I believe we're set for this. We shall see this proposal at the next planning commission meeting, right? Oh, we got to do the public hearing too. Any members of the public wish to come forward and address the commission through the public hearing?
Mr. Chair, if I can just mention that
Mr. Barton?
the applicant, when we discussed this before, had requested just because of the sort of long nature of the past planning review and that this request in various forms has gone on for a long time. If you're amenable to it, the applicant would love to have a vote tonight, which you can do if you feel so inclined. If you don't feel so inclined, you can certainly wait until the next meeting as well, which would be August 14.
I'm amenable to that, but I think we should take care of the public hearing component of this, and then we could potentially entertain a motion for that. Just wanted to confirm there's no one online in the queue that wishes to address us.
There is not.
All right, then we can close the public hearing. Those logistics are taken care of. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
A question about procedure.
Commissioner Williams?
If we were to move forward, do we have to suspend the rules, or don't we have a procedural step we have to take?
I guess I would advise if you were to move forward, then you should make a motion to suspend the rules to move forward. Your bylaws say that generally you would wait 2 weeks, but it doesn't say you must. To play it safe, we often just advise that if you were to move forward, you would have a motion to suspend the rules, though. You don't have to. We advise doing so.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's
Yeah,
been our
Commissioner Williams?
practice, if we are going to move forward without a second public hearing, to do what you've suggested, which is suspend the rules. I'm prepared to make that motion. I know that some members of the commission don't really like to do that, so I think we can have some discussion about that, but for purposes of discussion, I would move that we suspend the rules and move forward with a vote on this tonight.
All right, sounds like a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Chapin. Any discussion on that motion?
You know, I will discuss. I'm comfortable with this just because this is the second public hearing.
Yes.
There's been an adjustment through the city council. There's been good process.
Right.
So we're back again with an adjustment through the process we have in place here in East Lansing. I think I'm very comfortable voting to approve this tonight. So.
Yes.
I agree. Yeah, I think
agree
it's.
too.
I think we've seen this handful of times already. Council's seen this. It's a minor deviation from what we've already seen, and I think the applicant did a good job of explaining that, as well as providing some updates on the traffic study and the trees on the site. So I'm inclined to vote in support. So.
Yeah, me too.
Seeing no discussion, I think we can call the question on this. So all those in favor of suspending the rules and taking action on this agenda item tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, so the ayes have it. Motion carries 4-1. So is there a motion then to approve this item? What page is the motion on? Oh, Commissioner Williams always has it. She's the best of us.
You ready for a motion?
I'm ready for the motion.
We are.
Motion by Commissioner Williams.
I move to recommend to City Council the approval of the site plan request by Puff Puff Tobacco, Aqeel Daudi, if I pronounced that name correctly, to construct a single-story multi-tenant retail building and 42-space parking lot at 210, 218, and 224 West Lake Lansing Road for the following reasons. The proposed development meets all applicable ordinance requirements. The proposal meets the standards of review identified in sections 50-38 of the Code of Ordinances, and the proposed use of the property is compatible with surrounding land uses and will not adversely impact the use and enjoyment of adjacent properties.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Chapin. Any discussion on this?
Do
We've heard some
do
of
we
it already.
need to include the condition?
I just was going to
With-
say,
Oh,
I goofed.
Oh, she goes.
Next
so.
page.
There's about
y-
5,000
Well,
of them.
Yeah, could I just,
Yeah, just reiterate
add,
them.
subject to the, hang on one second, to the 9 conditions detailed in the staff report.
Yes.
Second by Commissioner Chapin.
Second.
Thank you for repeating yourself. A discussion on this? I'll just say, I'm inclined to support it. I supported it with the drive-through. As someone with young kids, I thought that was an appropriate use for that area and would have been beneficial. But even without a drive-through, I think it's a positive proposal, and I think it's a good fit for the community. So, any other discussion before we take a vote?
No.
Can I just
Oh, Commissioner Denault?
Landon, I know when we saw this the first time, I had asked a question about how the city goes about giving notice to nearby property owners about a potential development. Because this is coming back to us, was that similar procedure followed again?
Yes.
Okay, I just
We
wanted
send
to.
a mailer out to every property owner and resident within 350 feet.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that the public, immediate public who might be impacted were made aware, because we had already seen it again, or we had already seen it. Yeah, you get it.
And that's because it came back on the agenda as a public hearing, right?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the site plan reviews in our process requires a public hearing by the planning commission, and a vote to recommend by the planning commission does not require a public hearing by the council, but does require discussion and a vote.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor vote aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion carries. That takes us on to item number 6.2, a public hearing by the Planning Commission to consider Ordinance 1536, amendments to the Zoning Ordinance and other sections of the City Code to permit and incentivize certain buildings and site incentives, allow upper floor residential uses in certain business zone districts, and permit mass timber production and manufacturing in industrial districts. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you. So, I mean, that was a great summary right there. I don't think I have anything to add. I'm just kidding. So we, as you may recall, you received a
Landon, did you hear that? Humor.
presentation in the summer of 2023 about mass timber, what it is, what the potential benefits are. After the discussion and presentations, the Planning Commission requested the City Council form a study committee. The council responded, or the mayor requested instead that this return to the Planning Commission for a Planning Commission study committee rather than one formed by council. And so the Planning Commission formed the Mass Timber Study Committee in January of this year, and members were appointed by the Planning Commission chair. I do want to recognize the people who were on this committee, as there was a lot of work. The committee met several times over the course of several months, and I think did some great work. We had Barbara Anderson, Dr. George Berghorn, Dr. David Chapin for the Planning Commission, Sandra Lupian, Tim Rozowski, Steve Purchase, Jeff Smith, and also we had participation from non-voting members, but also East Lansing staff. We had Adam Wright from Midwest Strategy Group, David Pearson, a retired lawyer, and then staff, we had myself, Kobe Sunday, Cliff Walls, and Grace Whitney, and I should also mention Alicia Wrighton, who has stepped in and helped quite a bit as well. The Mass Timber Study Committee met several times, sort of wrapping up in May of 2024, and has recommended several zoning ordinance amendments. Generally speaking, what is recommended, I'll pull this up on my screen. Generally speaking, what's recommended is sort of an earn and spend incentive system that is meant to incentivize construction of buildings that are made from mass timber, that are net zero certified, that are LEED, Gold, or Platinum certified, or that include affordable housing with a minimum of 50% of units being priced at or below a certain percent or price point. So we propose that by proposing, I guess, having a developer propose a building meeting some of these characteristics, they could then receive certain development points. They can say, if my project is approved through the process and I'm showing that I meet XYZ, that I have a mass timber building that has no fewer than 50% of residential's units priced at or below 60% of area median income. For example, let's say that they have this building. They're proposing that during the development process, and they can then have some certainty that when staff verifies that they would indeed meet these requirements, then they could get a certain amount of incentive points. In the example that I mentioned, mass timber with a majority of residential units at or below 60% AMI, that would be a total of 4 base points. We also proposed that with affordable housing in particular, at a certain level, if you combine affordable housing with mass timber and net zero, then you would get a bonus point as well. And so that was meant to identify essentially combinations that we found would be especially helpful or especially desirable. And this is for any building that would be constructed in this way in any location. Now, when we have our earning points system that's set up in this way, and I'm happy to take questions about it, but I want to tell you how we spend points. So the developer would then be able to, I realize I'm not sharing my screen, I'm sorry. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I just blew it up on the screen to make it a little bit easier to see how a developer might earn points. If you propose a building that's would be LEED Gold certified, so LEED is Leadership in Environmental and Energy Design, I might have that backwards. A third-party system to sort of certify that buildings meet a certain number of requirements that make this maybe what would be considered a green building. Platinum LEED certification would be more points within the LEED system. So maybe 150 points, I'm forgetting the exact number, would hit gold certification, and 180, for example, would hit platinum. So a platinum is a harder standard to hit, and that's why 1 point was proposed to be earned if you have a LEED Gold building, 2 would be earned if you have a platinum LEED building. We also have net zero, which is identified as another way to essentially build more of a green building. I admit I'm not an expert on net zero, and so I don't feel especially confident in explaining what net zero is or how it works, but suffice it to say that it's a building system that significantly reduces the emissions of a building and it reduces its environmental impact. The net zero certification could be met under this proposed system by qualifying under a certain appendix in the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. So there are ways to meet these to get these points, I guess. 2 points are proposed for the net zero certification development points in this case. And then for a mass timber building, we also propose a definition where a mass timber building would be one defined as one comprising structural elements of heavy timber construction, primarily of solid built-up panelized or engineered wood products that meet minimum cross-sections dimensions as defined in the 2021 version of the International Building Code. Maybe I should step back for a moment and just say mass timber is essentially heavy timber that has been laminated together to form a very substantial, very massive piece of wood, hence the name. And we have experts in the audience that I'd like to, I guess, point out in particular, call out by name. We have Sandra Lupian from MSU Mass Timber. We have Steve Purchase from Michigan Council of Carpenters and Millwrights. And then we have Adam Wright in the back from Midwest Strategy Group. granted a lobbyist, but a lot of knowledge. So I'm sure any of them might be willing to help us understand these items a little bit better during public comment. As far as the affordable housing goes, we identified that 60% of area median income, which is a sort of certain level that's defined by HUD. If your income is at or below 60% and you're pricing your units for that person to be affordable for that person, if 50% or more of those items are priced at or below 60% AMI for 20 years, and you can put that as a condition of your approval, we can have contracts that would guarantee that. We'll give you a point. If you were to price 50% or more of units at or below 30% of area median income for 20 years, we'd give 2 points. So that's intended to reflect sort of the greater investment on the part of the developer by pricing their units or half their units at a lower cost. I mentioned the bonus point. The committee identified that 1 bonus point would be granted where a net zero building or a mass timber building would have no fewer than 50% of units priced at or below 30% AMI. In discussions after this recommendation, I had mentioned to the committee that I personally am a little concerned about this and think that it might be worth considering having that bonus point be at or below 60% AMI. I just want to throw that out there for a discussion point. So moving on real quick to the incentives, as I said I would 20 minutes ago. If a developer is showing in their plans, their proposals, that they could meet a certain number of the conditions to get a certain number of points, staff would then vet that proposal and essentially confirm the points and say, okay, now you've shown that you've earned X number of points, let's spend those on your project. The incentives that are proposed by the committee are that you could either, I guess either or both. You could reduce your minimum lot area requirement by 5% per point, up to 25% in certain districts, in the RM, which is a multifamily residential district, or in the EV district, East Village, which is the area east of Bogue, west of Hagedorn, and south of Grand River. So in these residential districts and the East Village district, you have a minimum lot area requirement per unit. So let's say, as an example, let's say the requirement is 1,000 square feet per unit, and you have 20,000 square feet on your property, then you could have 20 units. This proposal, if you had a certain number of points, let's say you had 5 development points then to spend, you could have up to 25% reduction in the minimum lot area per unit. So then we'd end up with a requirement, say, of 750 square feet of lot area per unit under this hypothetical proposal. So then you can end up having substantially more units on the same property, which could essentially make the project pencil out better. Similarly, in other districts, RM54, B1 or B2 or OIP, excuse me, that's an industrial park, we're proposing that you could use the development point for an additional story. But that would only be 1 story in these lower intensity districts, RM54, B1, and I think I've made a mistake here. It should be B1 or B4 zone districts. The B2 is a little more intense, B4 is less intense. So certainly we can make that correction before this comes back to the Planning Commission next time. We propose 2 additional stories in some of the higher intensity business districts, and again, what I've written on this page is a mistake. I meant to write B2 or B5 units, those districts. Those are the more high intense business districts that aren't downtown. The B3 district, which is downtown, or the EV district, the East Village district, we're proposing any number of stories as long as you have the development or the incentive points for them. In the B3, for example, the downtown, you currently have a minimum height requirement of 4 stories, a maximum of 8. And then subject to, under certain circumstances, through special land use process, the council could grant additional stories above that. But there aren't necessarily standards right now to determine when that kind of, when that approval might be made. And so in an effort to reduce that uncertainty for the developer, the incentives, both the earning and spending of the points, of the incentive points, would be subject to vetting and approval by staff. And so then by the time they come through the process, they can essentially be guaranteed that these details of their plan will not be up for questioning. They've already been essentially approved. But then at the Planning Commission and City Council level, you can focus more on the other aspects, such as land use proposal. So before I move on to the other items, I guess I just wanted to ask, does the Planning Commission have any questions about what I've explained so far with the development, earning or spending incentive points? It's not the most easily, I guess, it's not easy for me to immediately grasp. So I want to be cognizant of that, and if you have questions, spend some time to answer those.
Maybe I can just add a little
Please
piece.
do,
Of
Commissioner.
Thanks a lot, Lynn. And again, I've said it publicly here before, you did a really nice job working with that committee, and it was a very talented committee. I was quite humbled. A lot of expertise on that committee that I thought put together some good thoughts. You know, on a real simple, we got into this conversation through mass timber, and I, for one, entered that conversation, as you well know, pretty naive, without a lot of knowledge, very little knowledge, if any. I learned some, but what we ended up with, I think, is a set of values for the city of East Lansing. It was more than mass timber. It's about, LEED certification. It's about net zero. It's about mass timber, which I've learned has some real attributes, not only for our community, but for the greater community at large, and affordable housing. And so there's some values here on paper. I expect the values to remain intact. I suspect there'll be some discussion about the points here, as well as at City Council. And I think the incentive piece is where there's going to be some discussion as well. But I wouldn't want us to lose sight of the fact that here on paper are our values for the city of East Lansing, which I think we came to those values with a lot of expertise and some good discussion. And I was very comfortable with the set of values and where the conversation goes from here. This is really good fodder for public hearing and public input, because there will be a lot, I'm sure. But I don't want us to lose sight of the values that we created here, and I think that's at the core of this in my mind. So, and there'll be we have some great input here, and we'll get some more here tonight and with City Council, and the beat will go on for a little while. So I just add that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chapin. That was a good summary. Appreciate that. Any other questions?
I have one.
Commissioner Williams?
I'm not really sure I'm even ready to ask this. It's all kind of still just sort of sinking in. This is really good work, let me say. I mean, it's really intriguing, really interesting. We definitely need a review of our incentive policies and practices in the city. And I think the environmental consideration and certainly the affordable housing consideration are the appropriate values, as Commissioner Chapin mentioned. I'm wondering, though, as we think about this, because this is so full of value judgments and policy considerations, I just wonder if the comprehensive planning group needs to take a look at this and really think about those value judgments and policy considerations. It seems like this seems to be a little out of step, given the fact that that is happening at the same time that we're having this conversation. So just procedurally, how do you pull this into that, or what are you thinking about that?
Yeah. If I may, we in fact had a little discussion about that at tonight's committee meeting, where one of the members said, I'd like to talk more about the zoning ordinance aspects, because we might potentially see ordinance changes coming out of this comprehensive plan update. Which I agree to an extent. The comprehensive plan is meant to be a guidance document, and not necessarily saying this is how we're going to do it, but this is what we want to get to. So it is a good opportunity for a sort of a values discussion. I think that in our discussions with the committee, we kind of determined that we're already there to an extent. That the values have been shown in other ways and in other projects. Not necessarily in the comprehensive plan, but I guess I think about this as being a change to the zoning ordinance, a change to how you bring about these potential desirable changes that we've already identified as desirable, and less so as whether or not these are desirable.
Could I?
I
stop
certainly
here,
understand
just
your point.
continue the conversation, maybe? I'm just thinking about, since the time that I've been working on the Planning Commission, we've had a lot of buildings constructed downtown that changed the look and feel of downtown with respect to the height of buildings. And there's been a lot of citizen talk about that. I think pro and con, mostly pro, I think, especially as people have kind of gotten used to the new look and feel of downtown. And so I don't think it's just about values in terms of what we want to incentivize, but it's also about the impact, the height issue. So I don't know, I just think if the goal of the comprehensive plan is partly to engage the community in these kind of fundamental value judgments, change of the look and feel of their community, wouldn't that be a good way to bring the community along and not just have an ordinance change, as long as that process is happening at the same time?
I think I understand your point better now, and I appreciate it. I think that we do have time, and this would be a great discussion point for our Climate Month activities in August. I think that what I see as sort of the timeline for approval, should this continue to go through, fits in pretty perfectly. Should the commission determine to vote on this, presumably at the next meeting, that wouldn't get to the city council to set their public hearing date until September. So they very likely wouldn't have a public hearing on this until October 1st anyway. So I think we have some time to get it through various groups, including the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee. That said, we had an open house on campus at MSU STEM building, itself a mass timber building. We had some public show. I wouldn't say it was our most well-attended event ever. But we certainly have had some public interest in this. We haven't had any opposition to any of these requests so far, but this is our public hearing tonight, our first one. So we can certainly see if there is any.
Well, and to be fair, I'm not sure that community members would think about building height being the outcome of a mass timber committee, a mass timber study committee.
Sure.
This seems maybe, I get it, I appreciate it, but I'm not sure that members of the public would expect this kind of a proposal to come out of that group.
Let's see. I'm looking at the notice language, thinking that it doesn't really explicitly talk about potential increased building height, so that does make sense. I guess holding on to that thought, are there other questions too?
I was just going to
That's a
say,
good point.
comment on Commissioner Williams' statement there is, I view these as two related but separate processes. I think this work group's been working on this language and they have their timeline they've envisioned, but I do think that impact of that, especially the building height, does dovetail into the comprehensive master plan process that we're going through right now. And I think, at a minimum, I think during the meetings in August that you had suggested, Landon, we probably should provide an overview of this process and the language that we're looking at, and just so everyone's on the same page and no one's surprised by what's being proposed. I did have I don't know, Landon, if you or the applicant is the appropriate person to answer this question, but who primarily constructed the language? Was it city staff or was it the work group themselves?
I was city staff.
Okay, so for section 50-7 for the definition portion, for the definition of mass timber building, it gives a definition of what that is, but then also at the end of that it says as defined in the 2021 version of the International Building Code. I think that, at best might be redundant, but at worst that might have to be, I'll go on up and then let me finish what I'm going to say and then you can address that. We would be required to update the ordinance should the International Building Code be updated in the future. So would it be better just to leave that portion of the definition out or to just reference the most current version of the International Building Code?
I'd like to defer to Santa Lupe on that.
So thank you for answering that.
This is the part that we figured out with mass timber. MSU, so to try to figure out how to define what is a mass timber building in a way that's clear and meaningful, right? I think what we were thinking is it would be very easy if you didn't clearly define it for somebody to be like, well, I put a mass timber column in my building, therefore it is a mass timber building, and that's not sufficient to earn any sort of incentive or benefit, right? But what I think what I hear you saying, and I wish that I could see the language. Is it up right now? Oh, thank you. That helps me because I did not memorize it. One comprising structural elements of heavy timber construction meet minimum cross-section dimensions as defined in the 2021. I think we put 2021 version of the International Building Code because that's the version that's about to be adopted into the Michigan Building Code, the 2021 Michigan Building Code, which should be, oh gosh, please in effect by February of 2021. And I know that David Pearson, from a legal perspective, kind of reviewed this to make sure that it would reflect and be easy to interpret. It might, but I think you actually brought this up last time we were here back in December. This very same thing. It could be worth. I'm just wondering if we need to kind of. It could be worth revising it to as defined in
The current version?
The most
current
recent.
version of the
Most-
International Building Code. Yeah, I think that's probably more reasonable. Good
Just
question.
trying to think ahead.
Yep.
I've never
We're
made
workshopping
mass
here.
timber products or mass timber buildings, but I imagine if a new technology or something were to come out, and you'd have to then go and update the ordinance, which would require us to go through this entire
Yep.
process.
Yeah, you don't want to
again.
do that at all.
Yeah.
So if it's the most current, I think that's the most reasonable way to handle this too. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any other questions for city staff before we welcome the applicants up to?
Although I do want to mention.
Mr. Bartley, go ahead.
We do have a few more amendments that are contemplated in this proposal that I want to explain.
Oh, please
So
do,
just
and then we'll.
Very briefly, just a couple others. We wanted to, recognizing that the industry, the sort of mass timber industry is early. We wanted to make sure that we were allowing for the industry to also participate in East Lansing if that made sense. So we're proposing to introduce into our manufacturing district permitted use, which would be assembly of wood products from raw materials, interior work only, or production or processing of mass timber products. And so we've been making those principal uses subject to an approved site plan. Almost all uses in the city require site plan approval. So we would make those uses a permitted use with site plan approval in the manufacturing district, and also the same in the office industrial park district, OIP. And then finally, proposed to create principal uses subject that would be permitted with administrative approval in business districts, the higher intensity business districts. B2, B3, I'd like to strike B4. That's the lower intensity business district. So B2, B3, B5, and East Village districts, we would be allowing by right upper story residential of dwelling units of three or fewer bedrooms per unit. So currently, any multifamily, essentially residential units are required to go through the process of review and approval by Planning Commission and City Council. Any multifamily residential has to do that. In fact, except for a single-family house in the low-density residential districts, those are the only residential type that are permitted to be approved by staff. So anything beyond that needs to go through the process with Planning Commission and City Council. Because of the amount of uncertainty that's incurred by a developer, especially for a larger building that we anticipate to be built as mass timber or some of these other green building, I guess, categories, we wanted to reduce that uncertainty and by saying, okay, essentially the same thing. The upper story residential in the higher intensity business districts for dwellings of 3 or fewer bedrooms could be permitted with staff approval. The rest of the land uses that might be contemplated in that building would likely require site plan and special use approval of both. So I just wanted to clarify that isn't also proposed as part of this amendment, which would be a somewhat significant policy change. We also talked about considering to move we currently have diverse housing guidelines and special use review standards that essentially says within the downtown core, 25% of your residential uses must be senior housing, owner-occupied housing, or affordable housing. And so we're proposing potentially moving those from the special use review guidelines because they're specific to a certain area in town, therefore not necessarily appropriate within special use review guidelines that apply to all special uses. So we propose moving that to a new chapter, which would be this chapter of building and site incentives that would include all this information. So that's more of just a clarifying move that we propose, and that sort of ends the amendments that we're proposing out of this committee. But I want to make sure to mention those. So can I answer any questions about those last few amendments that are proposed? Oops. Okay, thanks.
Landon, going back to Commissioner Williams, go ahead.
That's a great summary. I appreciate you highlighting that streamlining of the approval process and providing more certainty during the pendency of the development process about the outcome. But I'm not sure I'm not sure we're appreciating how significant that is. That's a significant change in the city of East Lansing to remove planning commission. This would remove planning commission approval and city council approval in certain instances, correct?
It would essentially remove that approval process, the public hearing process for specific elements of the property. In most cases, most of these buildings will have to go through the process for a site plan review regardless. Our intent is to remove certain elements of those buildings from the process to increase the certainty. So the building height, the incentive points as earned, I guess, the building height or additional units, we'd want to say, yes, those will be approved to give, because you meet the points, you've earned these points, you've shown that you can earn these points. And same thing, if you're going to propose upper story residential, those will be approved. That use is permitted by right. However, the other uses that might be in that building would likely not be. So we wouldn't necessarily be removing the public process from the development of the build. We wouldn't be removing the public process altogether, I would say. We'd be removing specific elements of that project from public process. So those would no longer sort of be in danger of being denied unless the whole project was denied. Does that make more sense?
Sort of. I think I still need to know more about that. I think it's interesting. I think it's, don't misunderstand my question as not appreciating the concept, because I do, and it's very reminiscent of some of the work we did on the form-based code process. Part of the value of that was trying to streamline our system of approval in the city, and so I appreciate that. I just want to make sure I kind of understand all the nuances of it, and that we all do, because that's a big policy change. And it has political implications that I'm not sure are obvious just from kind of an explanation.
And if I can speak to that very briefly.
Sure.
I think I touched on it a little bit in the policy implications part of my staff report, but not enough maybe. The intent with allowing the additional, I guess, the residential, upper story residential units by right is to be only in business districts, so the higher intensity business districts only. And that would essentially allow an increase in residential density without an impact on land use intensity. So you'd have, because you already have a business district that is almost always more intense of a land use than residential, even multifamily residential. So you are essentially introducing something, a new facet, being residential units, into that district that can already handle it. Because you're not going to have the parking strains at the same time, for example. You have residential parking needs generally at night, business during the day. You already have the infrastructure. You already have the building. Bones basically already there. Maybe you can be converting existing vacant offices, for example, into residential uses. So the intent with this particular amendment, as proposed, is to only be introducing upper story residential in the more intense locations and not in lower intensity zone districts already. The outcome of doing that can be essentially you're introducing some density where it's more appropriate, which can remove the pressures on the lower density neighborhoods, for the development pressures, because you're essentially accommodating that pressure. In a business district, we know there's pressure for additional residential uses. Where is it most appropriate? The higher intensity business district or the lower intensity neighborhood? I think I would argue, and maybe a lot of the public would too, we should keep in the business districts. And so the amendment is designed to do that, in a sense, to protect the lower density residential neighborhoods, if that makes sense.
It does, and if I could just say, just an awful lot of good work here. A lot of thoughtful, in-depth work that I was not expecting to be addressed by this committee, but I certainly appreciate it. I want to thank you and the committee members for doing this, because we really need a review of this whole process in the city, and so thank you, and to my fellow commissioner down there for working on this and bringing this forward.
Yeah, completely agree. Landon, you kept saying certainty, but to me, the benefit's really efficiency. So this makes the process more efficient for approval, and it makes it more aligned with other municipalities from what I've seen.
I think I agree to an extent, because this doesn't necessarily erase the public process, and doesn't the approval process is still typically anywhere from 13 to 16 weeks. It would still essentially have that process. You would just be removing, I guess it would be a more efficient way of making sure that certain items were approvable, but it wouldn't necessarily be a change in the public process as much as just removing certain items from it to allow for greater certainty for the developer, and then maybe for the neighbors.
Thank you.
Does that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question and the explanation. That was really helpful for me. So,
Thank you.
Any additional questions on that? Landon, do you have anything else you want to provide an overview of?
Just that I'd again defer to our experts in the audience if you have specific questions, especially the technical questions about mass timber. We have world-renowned experts in the audience here, so they're renowned by me.
All right, so we're ready to hear the overview, and I defer to you as to what order you all want to provide us the overview in.
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity. My name is Steve Purchase. I'm the Communications Director for the Michigan Regional Council of Carpenters and Millwrights. You might ask yourself, why is the Communication Director here talking about mass timber? That's because in my prior role, I spent more than a half dozen years exploring the use of mass timber, primarily in modular construction applications, but developed a pretty intense familiarity with both the material itself, its application and construction, as well as the development process. And so when I look at the proposal as it's developed, it started with mass timber, obviously, but it's a very happy outcome, I think, that the committee explored a wider array of sustainable building practices, both with respect to the environment, but also with respect to community sustainability and accessibility on the affordable housing piece. I think they are all of a piece and aligned with the individual components and East Lansing's values, which is not always the case for these types of endeavors. So that was very nice. Because it started with mass timber, and in my view, and I know there'll be discussion on the points, but in my view, I think mass timber is worth that additional point, that 3 points. Really boils down to 6 kind of headline facets as to why mass timber generally is a preferable construction material in practice for the city to embrace. The first, of course, is sustainability and environmental impact. I was talking with Sandra earlier, some of the more recent studies on the totality life cycle embodied carbon suggests a decrease of 80 to 90%, which is pretty massive. To use a word that's appropriate here. And not only that, but mass timber buildings, by the way they're constructed, are very high quality and tend to be safer buildings too. Certainly safer than light framing, but even maybe perhaps counterintuitively, steel structures. I'm the son of a fire chief, and so I've always marveled at the fire performance of mass timber structures and how they operate to, just by the inherent nature of the material, slow down and cause fire to burn in a predictable manner that can be better controlled for. Third, mass timber facilitates a really human-centric biophilic design. It brings nature into our interior spaces in a way that's really great for mental health and for the quality of life for the inhabitants of these structures. Fourth, and important to me in my current role, because mass timber is both a structural material but also a finish element in almost every application of mass timber, it facilitates the need for, the demand for, and the use of local skilled labor, because you don't want to invest into the green premium, into this material, and have it marred through the construction process and lose the aesthetic benefits of the material for the lifespan of the building. Fifth, and I think really important for the community, is that mass timber structures are constructed, the way they're constructed is much quieter and much faster, resulting in a lower impact to the immediate vicinity neighbors, but also the community in general. If you can imagine downtown construction, limiting the amount of time that streets have to be closed, that cranes have to be on site, is a net benefit, even as you're talking about higher building heights in those areas. And finally, to sum up, I think this particular policy offers East Lansing a pretty outstanding opportunity to be a leader in this state and in promoting a new building technology and industry that will bring jobs, certainly, but also have a cognizable beneficial impact on our environment. And so for those reasons, I'm a big fan of mass timber and of what you're doing here. I think it's important to consider for a moment why incentives like this for mass timber, right? For all of the facets that we talk about in terms of sustainable building, they all have a cost premium associated with them compared to a value engineered approach, race to the bottom way of developing buildings. Mass timber in particular, not only does it have a green premium because it's a new industry, but the construction methodology requires a lengthier pre-construction schedule. These are buildings that are engineered very much up front, every piece modeled and put in place, not only to understand loading, but to facilitate the manufacture of precision components and how they're delivered on site to, again, realize the advantages of a shorter schedule and lighter construction impact. In addition to that, so those premiums serve as a disincentive to developers choosing these construction methodologies. And what I think was really creative that the study group and the city came up with is a series of incentives not based around how wide can the city open its coffers and invest taxpayer dollars into private developments, but how can the city offer accommodations for certainty, for predictability, and for building sizing to be able to reach the critical scale by which the natural economics of a project can begin to offset those green premiums. And so I think that's a really creative, sound approach that, again, is very much aligned with East Lansing's values. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions and humbly ask for the Commission's approval of this proposal.
Thank you for that overview. First question I have is, I know you mentioned jobs. Is mass timber currently being manufactured in the state? And if you could you look into your crystal ball and kind of predict what the next decade or so would entail?
Yeah, it's not. Nationally, it really took off in the Pacific Northwest for some good natural reasons in terms of the timber stock and kind of the timber trade that already existed there, as well as some early vision from building officials to create accommodations before the building code caught up to the material. There is less mass timber production capacity east of the Mississippi and certainly the Midwest. Given, and Sandra, I'm sure can speak in more depth to this, but given Michigan's natural resources and our strong history of forest products, I think Michigan is ideally poised to start first with the processing of mass timber. So even if we're not producing panels here, doing the post-production processing, the CNC machining of the particular parts for use in projects is probably what we're set up to see first in the state, given a lower cost barrier to entry. But I think Michigan is really well poised to see mass timber production take off here. And the first step to that is facilitating the demand for the material in construction projects across the state. And that's what I think this work group does.
Great. Any additional questions? All right. Thank
Awesome.
you for your overview.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Adam Wright, do you want to come up next?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Glad to be back. Adam Wright with Midwest Strategy Group. And just want to remind you, we are a multi-client government relations firm that represents developers. We represent local governments, environmental organizations throughout all of Michigan. And our goal is to effectively represent our clients by creating strategic economic development policies and opportunities that encourage growth within communities. So I'm happy to be back here again. We were here before you just over a year ago with an initial proposal regarding just mass timber. And we were talking about incentivizing use of mass timber in downtown East Lansing. And since our last presentation, with the guidance of the Planning Commission, they created a study committee to look at this proposal and determine the best way forward. We're grateful for the extensive conversation and work of the study committee, including Commissioner Chapin, and for the comprehensive proposal that's before the Planning Commission today. This comprehensive proposal that incentivizes the utilization of other green and sustainable development is an amazing first step in attracting serious green developers into investing in East Lansing. We're particularly appreciative of the ability to highlight the use of mass timber in this proposal. While the utilization of mass timber is a relatively new concept in Michigan, it's been used effectively throughout the world for some time now. Highlighting it in the way that the study committee did acknowledges the need to incentivize this exciting building material so that it will grow in use and will increase demand in our state. And as Steve said, make no mistake that East Lansing adopting this proposal makes you a true leader in the state of Michigan in regard to mass timber. When this proposal is enacted finally by City Council, it will provide for the city to attract green and sustainable development. The study committee had substantive conversations regarding further incentives, as Steve kind of mentioned, that included financial incentives, but did not include that in the proposal. Any financial incentives provide additional attractiveness to prospective developers and should be something the Planning Commission asked the City Council to consider when approached with different development opportunities. And before I close, I just want to say that I'm happy to work, been happy to work with the city and staff on this proposal. And we are working more comprehensively at the state of Michigan as well. We most recently had your state senator, Sam Singh, to the MSU STEM building to have conversations about the mass timber industry and how we grow that in the state of Michigan. As we talk about manufacturing opportunities and other incentives for developers, the state seems to be eager to play a role. The budget that the governor signed today included $1 million in the DNR budget to be utilized for mass timber. And so I think that this definitely helps East Lansing become a leader in this space and goes hand in hand with what they're doing at the state of Michigan. And so thank you, thanks Commissioner Chapin for participating in that, in the study committee. We appreciate all of your work, and we appreciate all the work that the study committee has done on this and bringing it forward to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, so just let me
Commissioner
say,
Chapin?
Cynthia, I know that you reached out and said thank you, and Adam, you're saying thank you. I benefited from a lot of talent. I mean, this was really a great group, and again, Landon, I thought, did a really nice job of moving the process along. So I appreciate I'm the commissioner, but there was a lot of talent in this group that really manufactured this. So I think, public hearing, this is going to be complicated. I think we're going to need to absorb all that we have in front of us. I had to when I first started on the committee. It's pretty complicated, has some implications, as you pointed out, Commissioner Williams. So this is going to take a little while to absorb and work through the process. City Council will grind on this as well. I'm sure of that. And so this will be a fascinating process in many ways. I think it's a good process with a really good outcome once we move through a lot of public comment and input. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, well said. Glad we were able to get you on that committee.
All right.
So it worked out for both parties. Quick question I have is for the table, for the points. You said, we're kind of breaking the mold for this. Was this based on any other municipality or any other state?
I can answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
we're not inventing, sorry, I'm Sandra Lupian. I'm the Director of Mass Timber at MSU, a program working to support the advancement of sustainable mass timber in construction and manufacture in Michigan and the Great Lakes region and beyond. And we're a close partner with the state of Michigan on that work, particularly because the state is really interested in having a mass timber manufacturing economy here. So there's a lot of conversation and happening behind the scenes, and hopefully we'll be seeing some forward movement on that in the next year or two. That's my hope. Crystal ball. The question about, are we kind of inventing the wheel here? No, actually, there's a couple of policies like this in other municipalities. One's in Emeryville, California, very similar development bonuses, points-based for different types of sustainable building or other desirable outcomes in that community. In the city of New Haven, I feel like I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's New Haven, Connecticut, also has a similar but newer policy that includes mass timber and other types of building construction materials. So those are the two that we looked at as early models for this. Obviously, the types of activities are not always the same. Both of those do include mass timber, as I mentioned, and the point structures might be different, and what's an incentive might be different. But we kind of look to those as how might that apply here? What might be desirable here? And I kind of wanted to just, while I'm standing here, and reiterate some of the thing that Steve said, which is about the kind of increased risk of doing like a LEED certified building or a mass timber building in the pre-construction phase, right? And how, particularly the piece of this proposal that Landon mentioned related to streamlining approval of those additional stories, of those incentives when those conditions are met, is really aimed at that, right? It's like, it can be very hard for a developer to say, yeah, I'm going to go with mass timber, or I'm going to go with this LEED certification because I have to do so much work and invest so much time and money before I put a shovel in the ground. I need some help here. And so the additional stories help it pencil, but then that streamlining of the approval process the idea is that could help reduce some of that upfront risk and make it a little bit easier to get past that hurdle. So I just kind of want to put that in my own words, but I wasn't meaning to speak formally tonight, but I'm here for questions.
No, that's really helpful background. Questions? Oh, Commissioner Williams?
I guess it's just a follow-up on that issue. The graphic here about the different kinds of categories, the environmental section, the LEED, net zero, mass timber, and the points that can be earned, and then you have the affordable housing section. And to your point about the amount of investment that it takes to get a mass timber building up and earning 3 points as compared to a gold LEED certification earning 1, that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Then when you compare the 3 environmental categories against the affordable housing category, I mean, there are costs associated with that too. So I don't have a good feel for how you decided that those categories were capable of earning 1 or 2 points versus 1, 2, or 3 in the environmental category. How do you make that value judgment? What's more deserving of earning points? What's more deserving of the highest possible incentive opportunity? How did you get there? How did you do that? I'm a big proponent of trying to incentivize all these things, but
I can
what do you
start,
think?
but I think we need to team answer this question because it was really a team effort and you were involved in it too. So we'll put together a response for you. From the this conversation started about mass timber primarily because it provides this climate, carbon, and sustainability benefit that is aligned with kind of the city of East Lansing's values along those lines, right? So we're like, well, is there a way to incentivize this to make it, for all the reasons we just said, if there's these challenges, how can we get over those hurdles? The assignment of points, we had a lot of conversations about the assignment of points, and you know, I think the amount of upfront investment that is associated with mass timber is probably higher, really. I think there's just more risk, and particularly since it's still a new technology, I think there is more risk. I think you may not move forward with your project unless you can get over this hurdle. And the carbon and climate benefits, which is what the conversation started with, are really impressive. I mean, Steve mentioned in passing a study, but the study came out back in March. I think it was March of this year, and it's by academics. It's an academic study, and it shows that when you compare reinforced concrete, structural steel, and mass timber building construction systems from an embodied carbon perspective, and embodied carbon is the carbon that's emitted when you are sourcing, manufacturing, and transporting your materials, embodied carbon. When you compare the global warming potential of mass timber versus concrete, mass timber is 39 to 51% lower in general. And that's just the embodied carbon than concrete. I'm sorry, I should have said than concrete. But if you then add in the thing that mass timber does that other building materials don't do, which is store carbon that is sequestered by trees when trees are growing, and then the dry weight of trees, of wood, is 50% carbon. So when you add together the embodied carbon and the stored carbon, the global warming potential of mass timber versus concrete then, according to this study, becomes 81 to 94% lower. And if it's steel, it's a little bit less dramatic, 76 to 91% lower. And that's one study, and there's a lot of different ways to model this, but this is being seen as like the most robust study based on a whole building life cycle analysis that we have yet. And this is much more dramatic than I expected to see. I was like, oh, really? I was like, oh my gosh. So I think it's those benefits combined with those challenges, I think, is what led to the conversation about like maybe mass timber gets 3 points. But now regarding the affordable housing piece, I'm going to leave you to speak to that because that's not my expertise.
Yeah, sorry. I would just add specifically to the points and the formulation between mass timber and housing generally. I think when you look at a mass timber building, and if you look at what mass timber buildings are built, where they are built now, they tend to be in that kind of mid 10, 12, 13 story range for the reason of that project cost. So getting the points to match to the number of stories that really start to make projects pencil, I think is another reason to support that additional point in mass timber. And then I would only add, and I'm sure Landon will have more to add on the affordable housing piece, but the difference between, and again, I'm most familiar with mass timber, so that's where I'll speak, but the difference between mass timber and the affordable housing piece is that there are other vehicles, financing opportunities, et cetera, that help defray those costs that simply aren't available for mass timber.
And then if I can jump in to talk about affordable housing a little bit. There was, as both Sandra and Steve mentioned, there was a lot of discussion among the committee about how to assign point values and what would be a sort of a good starting point, and I think that this really is intended as a starting point, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. The sort of green premium that they spoke about with the mass timber buildings or net zero or LEED is an upfront cost that the incentives are intended to help defray. The affordable housing price is sort of long tail, where you have a 20-year implication for the affordable housing. You're pricing your units at a certain level, which can change as AMI changes in an area, but either way, you're depressing the pricing of your units to be affordable to a certain group of individuals, and that's going to change your profit margins. So recognizing that's why we included the points for affordable housing. The levels, I would say, are also sort of 60 and 30% levels are essentially also a starting point. We sort of looked at those from those are kind of common planning levels, I would say, in the HUD, different HUD AMI levels for various HUD incentives. I think we could also look at 50% and 80%. 60% and 30% AMI is significantly lower. I mean, that's a significant difference in pricing. And so we also added the bonus development points or bonus incentive points that you see at the bottom of the first page of that summary. Well, I have it right up here on the screen. The bonus points were intended to recognize that the affordable housing, earning those affordable housing points is going to, is that long tail effect. The developer's going to be feeling that for a long time. So can we add some bonus points to increase the incentive even more when you're combining these green building incentives with the affordable housing incentives? I think we might see some changes in the point values. I think it's worth considering those very carefully. I think it's also worth considering the HUD AMI levels and whether or not 60% and 30% is the most appropriate place to start if it's worth changing. As I mentioned in my earlier presentation, I personally feel like the 30% AMI might be a really hard level for a developer to hit. Laudable, very difficult. And so that's why we were trying to have those bonus points, but I'm thinking maybe the 60% level is still just as worth giving those incentive points to. So it could be if you're going to hit either one of these incentive points or affordable, and the other one will give you a bonus point with this. That was sort of how the discussion went, I guess, as far as trying to address affordability issues. Does that make sense? Can I answer questions about that?
Sure does. And I think you've all done a really great job of speaking about the relative values here from a development perspective, from a developer's perspective. I mean, none of these projects are going to fly if they don't make sense financially. I get that, and I get how effective this kind of a program could be in making sure that these buildings get built and that we have affordable housing. I guess I'm sitting here thinking about it, though, more from a citizen perspective and what we want to incentivize as a community. We've got these green building practices, and we have a real significant need for affordable housing. And when I try to see the relative value in the point system, I just guess I'm still wondering, if we had an advocate for affordable housing here today, how would that advocacy be framed? Would it be framed from the lens of, is this making financial sense for the developer, or is it framed more about what's the value of affordable housing for our community as a community? And that's the piece I'm not hearing yet.
If I can address that then. The value of affordable housing is that we have a need for it. And so this essentially incentivizes it to make it easier for a developer to build it, to provide the amenity essentially to the community. So the citizen view is going to be, I'm having trouble affording housing in East Lansing, and this is going to help me afford housing in East Lansing.
That's not really what I meant. I meant as opposed to the points that are being given. That's what I meant. I get that part. I meant, why are these getting one or two, as opposed to, I meant the relative value in between the two categories. Just.
I think Steve made a really good point about that, which is that there are many
Sandra,
existing
come to the microphone.
Yeah, please come up so we can hear.
Hello again. I think Steve Purchase made a really good point along those lines, which is that there are many existing incentives already in place to support the development of affordable housing, whereas there are no incentives yet in place to incentivize mass timber, and many fewer in place to incentivize things like LEED and other types of green construction, particularly when we're talking about materials, more so when we're talking about energy efficiency. But this is, again, a new approach.
I think that was an excellent point. I agree with you, yeah.
You know, I might interject here too. So I think a couple of things have happened here. I think Landon's use of the word starting point I think is really relevant. This conversation that we're having right now replicates in many ways the conversation that we had at the end of our committee meeting. I mean, when you start putting affordable housing with, you know, a lot involved with affordable housing, mass timber, LEED certified, you get those at the table have expertise and have an interest in, and so these numbers moved around quite a bit. I'm having a picture of Landon in front of the group and the numbers on the spreadsheet moving as we had this very conversation. So really back to Landon's point about this being a starting point, we thought it important, I did for sure, that, okay, let's get this out for the court of public opinion. Because I think, Cynthia, the point you just made was made as well. Even in a mass timber, where does affordable housing fit in relationship to, where does mass timber fit in relation to? And so at some point, after some back and forth, point, counterpoint, let's get this out as a starting point into the court of public opinion, which I think will be very healthy. And as I said in my remarks, I figured this is where the conversation would land. This and the incentives, I think that's where the city council is going to pick it up as well. But really great start tonight. And again, we had a really savvy committee that was part of this. So it's out there, public comment, got a little process. So anyway, I share that.
Yeah, agreed. Commissioner Williams, is your contention more that affordable housing is only 2, or that mass timber is all the way up to 3, or is it just kind of the comparison between the two? I'm just trying to better understand your point.
I think my point was just, well, first of all, I started with a question. How did you decide how these points were assigned between these two categories? And I guess I'm just thinking out loud about it.
Yeah.
These align with my personal values. I mean, I'm interested and concerned about the environment and affordable housing too, but you know, I'm not sure how I would have assigned them either. I was curious about how you did, and then I also, I'm just kind of a little stymied by, you know, I get the development perspective here, but I guess I just think that the affordable housing proponent voice isn't in the conversation yet. I'm sure it will be.
And it has been at some level. I wouldn't want to let that pass without, was our discussion in the committee about affordable housing? There certainly was. We elevated that. I remember at one point in the conversation, but again, starting point, let's work on this a little bit. And I think it's a very complicated, I mean, in my short term on the commission, this is one that has a lot there. I have a little advantage to having had participated in the committee, certainly, and so, but I think we need to absorb this. There's a lot there. Good public hearing tonight.
A lot to digest for sure. Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we can open the public hearing. Is there any members of the public that wish to come forward? Seeing none, is anyone on the queue?
No, there isn't.
All right, we can close the public hearing, and we will see this at our next planning commission meeting, presumably. All right, that takes us on to the unfinished business portion of tonight's agenda. First up is item 7.1, consideration of a request from C&P LLC for approval of a site plan and special use permit for a stay-and-play motel and banquet facility in an existing building at 211 Harrier Drive. Mr. Bartley?
Thank you, and I'll just mention, you said the next meeting, and I wanted to just clarify that's August 14th, so we'll plan on seeing this item, the mass timber and others ordinance amendment request back at that time. So as you mentioned, the next item that we saw at the last meeting at 211 Harrier, this is a request for a stay-and-play motel, a small motel, 4 to 6 rooms, with a small banquet hall in an existing building at 211 Harrier Drive. This is just south of the Eagle Eye. Eagle Eye? Eagle Eye.
Eagle Eye. Yeah.
Thank you, Eagle Eye. That threw me for a second. Eagle Eye Golf Club up in the north end of town. On the screen, I'm showing an aerial view with north off to the right, so you can see the Eagle Eye Golf Club down at the far end of the bottom of the picture. The encircled in yellow is the building in question. So again, this is an existing single-story building with a walkout basement. The applicant is not proposing any changes to the site or the building, except some minor interior renovations necessary to turn it into the lodging use and banquet hall. Generally, the applicant intends to rent out the entire motel to groups, typically from up to 16 people per night, rather than on a per-room basis. I know we had some good discussion about this at the last meeting on July 10th, so I guess I'll leave it there and ask if there are any questions for me before we invite up the applicant.
Questions for Mr. Bartley? I don't have any, except for there's been no updates to the proposal or application. Okay, I didn't think so. I just wanted to confirm. So at this point, we're ready for the applicant. You want to come up and give any updates or your final pitch?
No updates. Final pitch is we would sell the building if we could. Office is a tough sell. The reason we went to sell the building is because people don't want to work in a building, and remote workers and COVID, and our business was heavily impacted. So I think it creates a better use of the building. I think it creates a needed use around Eagle Eye, and we're excited to bring some energy into a beautiful building. So that's my final pitch.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners? All right, I believe a motion's in order.
I'll move. I don't know, Cynthia, you're so good.
She is really good at it. She should probably.
Do you want to take, all right, I move to recommend approval by, is that, we're ready to make a motion here on?
Yeah, we're ready to make a motion. Page
Approval by-
page 8 of the.
By city council, of a request from, I don't have my glasses on. I mean,
That should say planning commission,
Yeah, it should say planning commission.
right?
Move to
Oh,
recommend.
approval
No, we recommend that's right, yeah.
to city council, not
That is correct.
by city council, right? Is that correctly?
Do you want my
The
reader?
motion. I can.
The request is
I'm
or
still
the
moving.
recommendation would be approval by city council
Yeah, right.
Okay, got it.
Correct.
of the request.
So you like the way it's written here, so just plot on, keep moving, Dave.
Absolutely. So on behalf of Commissioner Chapin, it sounds like he's moving to recommend approval by city council of the request from CNP LLC, Matthew Johnson,
Thank you.
for a 4 to 6 room stay-and-play motel with a banquet hall in the existing building at 211 Harrier Drive for the following reasons. Commissioner Chapin, can I assume that all the reasons that are listed are what you use as
Yes,
reasons?
that is correct.
Then I'll read those. The proposed development meets all applicable ordinance requirements. The proposal meets the standards of review identified in sections 50-38 and 50-94A of the Code of Ordinances. The proposed use of the property is compatible with surrounding land uses and will not adversely impact the use and enjoyment of the adjacent properties. This approval shall be subject to the following conditions. Number 1, approval is in accordance with the plans provided by the applicant and per testimony, subject to revisions as required. Number 2, all required permits shall be obtained from the Department of Planning, Building, and Development for all interior renovations as well as for exterior signs in accordance with Chapter 32 signs of the City Code. 3, the project shall be designed and developed in accordance with all applicable state and local statutes, codes, and regulations. And 4, a memorandum of special use permit shall be filed with the County Register of Deeds per section 50-96 of the City Code. Commissioner Chapin, do you think that reflected what you would have
I think
said?
that's a beautiful read. I'm late, I can't read, I mean,
Move.
so my motion is in play. please.
Moved by Commissioner Chapin. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Overby. Discussion. I'll just lead it off with, I think this is a creative use for the site there. I think it's ideal, honestly, even better than an office would be, and I think it's a great fit for that area. I think it was noted that there's the nearest hotel several miles away, so I think it's good for big golf groups or wedding parties, and I think it's I'm inclined to support it. So, any additional discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Do we have a second?
We have a second,
We
yeah.
did. I'm sorry, Joe.
Chapin, Overby, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. So that's unanimous, motion carries. So that one is on to City Council.
And so the
Thank you.
next, just to mention, the process, the next step would be that City Council would, at a meeting, will schedule their own public hearing on their consent agenda. So the next meeting, when they do that, which will likely be August 9th, is on consent agenda. The applicant doesn't need to be in attendance for that. And then they'll set a public hearing date at that time for their own public hearing, at which time they may or may not make a decision. So just wanted to state that into the record.
Perfectly stated.
Thank you.
All right. That takes us on to item number, thank you. That takes us on to item number 7.2, consideration by the Planning Commission of a request from Lake Trust Credit Union to remove a mature honey locust tree at 1300 West Lake Lansing Road that does not meet the tree removal standards contained in City Code, Chapter 48, Article 2, Division 3, Tree Removal and Land Clearing. Mr. Bartley.
Thank you. So you saw this at your last meeting on July 10th for a public hearing. This request is to remove a mature honey locust tree in front of the Lake Trust Credit Union at 1300 West Lake Lansing. On the screen, I'm pulling up a picture of the tree. This is a honey locust tree that with a diameter of approximately 24 inches. It was not planted by the applicant in 2015 when the credit union was built. It was existing at that time. My understanding is that the applicants or the tree company on behalf of the applicants requested a removal of 3 trees on the property, 2 of which were approved by DPW staff, and then the honey locust in question that you see on your screen, they did not find that it met the standards for removal. Our process has that the applicant can, at that point, either let go and say we won't take that tree down, or can come to the Planning Commission to appeal the staff's decision and ask for the Planning Commission to approve its removal. You might also remember that last time we talked about as a separate item whether or not the tree removal question is to go to the Commission on Environment versus Planning Commission. At that time, we still, it sounded like the consensus of the Commission was generally to keep it with still having some Planning Commission oversight, but we can still discuss that more in, later on this agenda. Can I answer any questions about the current application for 1300 West Lake Lansing?
I don't have any questions for you. Any questions from commissioners? No? Ready to chat with the applicant? You want to address the commission?
Mike Holmes, landscape architect, DJ's Landscape. We're the contractor for the client, Lake Trust. The tree has a substantial amount of large dead wood in it. Removing that dead wood would leave large scars on the tree, which will be slow to heal and potentially invite additional infestations. It also has, as a locust, has a tendency to have a lot of small dead wood in it on a perpetual basis. This tree hangs over the parking lot, so clients of the bank that park under that tree will have debris falling on their car. Because they have a lot of small leaves and they continually lose those leaves, it causes the bank to do additional sweeping of their parking lot to maintain their facility. They've held this tree for a long time because they knew that it would be questionable as to whether they could get it removed. But now with the larger amount of deadwood in it, that when that deadwood is taken out, it's going to deform the canopy of the tree. So aesthetically, it's going to lose its appeal. Amongst the other things, they're now hoping you will approve the opportunity for them to take it out. The tree will be replaced, so not with a honey locust. So, questions?
What will the tree be replaced with? Do you have another type of tree picked out? Or?
Probably a maple of some sort.
Okay.
It's a little cleaner, well-formed. There's not an excess number of maples in that area in town, so I think it would fit well.
Any additional, Commissioner Nault, sorry.
Do you not think that people who park under a maple tree will be annoyed by helicopters as much as they are by tiny leaves?
Not as bad as, well, the leaves, yes, I see that point. But they also drop a lot of small branches, very consistently and very typically, just because they have a lot of small dead wood in them. That's the part they don't like.
So I'm looking at the Google Street View for it right now. It looks like up into the tree, like taller into the tree, there's quite a bit of dead branches. Is that,
Correct.
that's what you're referring to? So
Yes.
it's not at the base, it's higher?
Correct,
Okay.
yes, up in the canopy.
Got it, canopy, thanks. Any additional questions? Commissioner Williams?
I guess I'm a little confused. I mean, when I looked at this report the last time we were all here, I recalled that the city's arborist took a look at this tree. Is that correct?
I believe they did.
So are you saying that these branches can't be addressed by a trimming?
They can be removed. The large branches can be removed. The smaller branches just as the nature of that tree, they have a lot of dieback on a regular basis. And it's all smaller branches, things the size of your fingers, but, this long, and they drop on the parking lot, on clients' cars, that kind of stuff. So that's a perpetual maintenance aspect that, at this point, with this larger loss of limb and so forth in the tree, the bank is hoping that they can avoid. Plus the removal of those larger branches and the deformation of the canopy, and the loss of the aesthetic value of it.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments?
I
Commissioner Nault?
actually have a question for Landon, so I wonder if I should just ask it when we start having our own discussion?
Ask him now, I would say.
Wonderful.
Ask away.
Commissioner Williams mentioned that the city's arborist did investigate the tree and found that, right, that it did not meet sort of our requirements as far as tree removal, right? So it's not substantially dead, substantially diseased, has insect damage, right? We are essentially being asked to remove a tree for inconvenience and for aesthetic reasons.
I would say that's accurate.
Okay, thank you.
So the planning commission can approve the tree removal following public hearing, which we had last time, if you find that the removal of the tree would either not substantially affect or reduce, I'll read the code, privacy, screening or buffering between adjacent uses and activities, wildlife habitat and movement, soil and slope stability, and regulated wetlands. Or if it finds that the proposed tree removal or land clearance is necessary for the economic use of property. So if you find that either one of those, I guess that A with the 5 conditions is met, or B with the condition about economic use of the property is met, at that point you would approve the tree removal. I would also mention that should the planning commission find that it can be approved and approves this, you can also ensure or impose reasonable conditions, which could include the replacement of the tree as the applicant mentioned is their intent. Now, if this tree had been illegally removed, which it hasn't been obviously, if it had been, the replacement sort of requirement is 2 3-inch diameter trees per 6 inches of tree removed. So at a 24-inch tree, the replacement would have to be 8 3-inch trees or more, or a total amount of tree diameter equal to 24 inches essentially. I would suggest that if the planning commission is inclined to approve this, you might require some sort of replacement of trees in line with what the applicant's suggesting, and perhaps in line with, specifically mentioning in line with the requirements of the tree manual of the city. We talk about maples, say that's great as long as it's not an invasive maple, right? So items like that would be addressed within the tree manual. So if the commission's inclined to approve.
So
I would
could we have a
suggest
condition
on
that basically says they replace the tree with a tree or a combination of trees in accordance with What was the manual you referenced?
The East Lansing Tree Manual.
I think
Commissioner Nault.
I think my only misgiving about prescribing the types of trees that might be planted is I might recall that during a previous discussion that we had with another applicant who wanted to cut down trees, it was not looked kindly upon for us to prescribe what types of landscaping that was replaced with.
Yeah. Point well taken, and that's why I think a more general description there would be good. So something like along the lines of East Lansing Tree Manual. But with that, I'll say we're veering very close into discussion territory. So I think we need a motion if we're going to entertain this further, unless there's any additional questions for the applicant.
If I could just add
Commissioner Overby.
a piece of information to perhaps advance the discussion. There's a honey locust tree on the city right of way that's in front of my house. And I am constantly picking up junk and debris from this tree. And it can be a piece that's 3 inches long, it can be a piece that's 12 inches long, it can be a piece that's 18 inches long. And it interferes with my lawnmower, and it's frankly a lot of work for me to pick these up as they keep coming, like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So I give that as a piece of information to perhaps help the discussion.
I think that's helpful. Yeah, I don't have much a basis for it, so it's good context.
And I also, as you may know, they have very small leaves. And I don't know how I end up with leaves in my pasta sometimes, but I do. They're just everywhere.
Sounds like you have a true nemesis.
Yes, I do.
All right, is there a motion?
I can't read anymore, so I would make a motion.
I'd be glad to make a motion. So I move to approve a request from Lake Trust Credit Union to remove a mature honey locust tree from the property located at 1300 West Lake Lansing Road, as the Planning Commission has determined that the following are true in accordance with Section 48-95 parentheses 3 of the City Code. The proposed tree removal will not substantially affect or reduce privacy between this property and those adjacent to it, screening or buffering from adjacent uses or activities, wildlife habitat and movement, soil and slope stability, or regulated wetlands. This approval shall be subject to the following conditions. A new tree according to the East.
I have one right here, a tree or a combination of trees.
So that the approval shall be subject to the following conditions. A tree or combination of trees shall be planted in accordance with the East Lansing Tree Manual.
All said. Is there a second? Moved by Commissioner Overby, seconded by
I'll second.
Commissioner Chapin. Discussion? Commissioner Williams?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. And I listened very carefully to Commissioner Overby's discussion about his worrisome locust tree.
And my pasta dinners.
Yes. Yeah, I have a worrisome oak tree that's owned by the city that drops stuff on my car and my driveway all the time. You know, I think we empower our staff to go out and make decisions based on our standards that we've set, and we had a staff person who has expertise in these areas go out and do that and render his judgment, and I think we need to support that. And so I'm going to be a no on this one.
Any additional comments?
Yeah, actually, Cynthia, can you help me with that a little bit? Can you go back and explain the process?
My oak tree?
No. I know that oak tree.
My
I drive by
nemesis?
that oak tree. No, our arborist was out there and passed judgment, rendered judgment.
Yes, the removal did not meet the standards for removal, that he is sent out to make a judgment on.
Okay. Okay. I guess I must have not listened well, or I kind of lost that in conversation. Okay, so, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was gonna let you go, and then I was gonna ask a
No,
question.
that's helpful for me. I'm puzzled by that, okay?
Well, I understand we have the right to make a different opinion, a
Yeah,
different
no, I
decision
get
here,
that. I know.
but, yeah.
I totally understand that. I'm just processing now.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
maybe a little differently. Okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Bartlett, so that, like, light bulb went off in my head. So this was denied by the arborist because it was their view or their opinion that the tree should not be removed, or was it the letter of the law didn't meet the standards
Didn't
of the
meet the
city?
standards.
'Cause-
Yeah.
Yes, that's essentially what it was, the latter, right? It wasn't a subjective decision, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It was based on.
That's correct. They have reviewed our standards in 48-94, Section B, and found that it did not meet those exceptions that would allow it to be removed, so did not approve the removal. But we do have this process to come to the Planning Commission in that case.
Yeah.
When did Cliff review that?
It was Andy Gordon.
Okay. Or when did the staff review that?
Mhm.
We don't need to mention her name.
Before the application.
Okay, all
I'm
right.
sorry, I want to say it was in possibly May of this year.
Okay.
I'll look up
all
the
right.
exact
Okay.
date.
Okay.
Were they required to plant trees for the other trees they cut down, or is it just a tree
I don't
of
believe
this
so.
size? Okay, so what,
Required to, I don't
okay, so
believe
what
they-
triggers them under the East Lansing Tree Manual to have to plant new trees?
What triggers the planting of new trees?
Yes.
If they're removed illegally.
Oh, removed
So
illegally?
If they're illegally removed, then they must replace
So essentially,
6 inches of tree diameter with 2 3-inch trees.
what we're giving them if we approve this is essentially just the penalty for illegally cutting it down?
Well, yes, if you were to require replacement at the same rate. You don't have to require
They don't
that
have to.
replacement at the same rate.
No,
I brought that up as I guess, to tell you what the replacement requirement is if trees are illegally removed, which could be a guideline, doesn't need to be.
Okay, not sure I understand. So
Mm.
if the tree were to be illegally removed, their penalty amongst potentially a fine would be that they would have to plant trees to meet the diameter of the tree that was cut down. So essentially, that's the condition that we're imposing.
Well, the condition that was mentioned in the motion didn't specify. It was add a tree or trees meeting
In accordance with the East
tree
Lansing
manual.
Tree
Mhm.
manual. So that you
The tree
took
manual
that, your
gives you the
interpretation
option
of that
of
was
different-
just the standards of the types of trees that is selected.
Correct.
Okay, understood. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Okay, so I might have a comment here,
Mr.
Joe.
Chapin.
I just want to clarify and think aloud with my fellow commissioners here. This tree in question is on the owner's property, not on the city property, as Chuck just mentioned his problem was. And the motion has the owner replacing it following the directions in the tree manual. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'm comfortable supporting the motion for those reasons.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Reed.
So I am also going to support this proposal, and I have a couple of reasons. I do respect and appreciate the opinion and views of the city arborist. I also believe that the landowner is planning to replace this tree with another tree that will be relatively, I believe, soon of equal quality. But the other reason is I do believe it's appropriate for landowners, homeowners, property owners to want to revise their property and landscaping based on aesthetics and convenience. I'm a gardener. I have a triangle in front of my home that looks out on the Bailey Park. It's taken me 17 years of revising the plantings and the trees and the perennials on this triangle to get it right, and this year I did. But that's because I kept changing it and revising it and replacing what was there with something that was better, and I get lots of positive comments on it. So for those reasons, I'm going to support this.
like this is some sort of metaphor or something with the perspectives on both sides of me. I feel like I'm the swing vote here. You know, my thoughts are, I feel like we are taking into consideration the perspective of city staff because we're adding an additional condition, which I think is a good compromise and is sufficient. So I value their opinion. They've outlined their opinion. This appeals process exists for a reason. They made their case. Chuck so well eloquently explained how big of a nuisance and nemesis these types of trees are. So with all that, I think this is a good compromise, and I'm inclined to support. So with that, I think Commissioner Denault.
As if I wouldn't have anything to say
Oh.
about a tree removal. Not that it's going to make a difference in anyone's mind.
It's okay.
But
It's good.
I am not in support of cutting down this tree, and I think I've already made, my views on this sort of plain, that to me, this seems like valuing valuing convenience and subjective aesthetics dictated by what humans feel is important versus the tree itself. I think it's a false given that we should just simply assume that humans and what humans want to do are more valuable than trees, especially given our, as Commissioner Chapin mentioned, our commitment and values of environmental sustainability in this city. I don't think we do a very good job in this city of demonstrating those values, especially when it comes to the value of trees. And so I think that is, this might just be one tree, but I think we're saying, yeah, humans and what they want are more important than trees in approving this. I think the second thing that I would say, it's proven that older trees sequester more carbon and provide more cooling shade and do more work mitigating the effects of climate change than small trees. And so by saying, well, it's a one-to-one swap out, right? They're cutting down a large tree, but we're asking them to replace it with 2 small trees, 8 small trees. That's fine. It is scientifically proven, however, that those small trees will not do the same environmental good as that one large tree. And so I will be voting no on this one.
Okay. Well said. I think unless there's no comments or questions for staff, I think we're ready for a vote on this. If you want to do a roll call vote.
Absolutely. Commissioner Chapin, how do you vote?
Yes, support?
Okay. And I'm sorry, I should have repeated the motion. We have a motion to approve made by Overby, seconded by Chapin. Commissioner Chapin has just voted yes. Commissioner Denault, how do you vote?
I actually have a question.
Yes.
Can I make an amendment at this point?
You can make a
friendly amendment?
You can make a motion to add a condition.
Yeah. I actually want to add something to the condition that's already been offered.
Okay. So I think you'd make a motion to amend one of the conditions, and this would be a secondary motion. We would
Okay.
discuss and vote on this, and then
Do
we would
want to vote
discuss.
and then I
No,
can add
no,
mine?
I'm saying we would. It's a secondary, so basically, moving that one aside, we're discussing and potentially voting on a secondary sub-motion.
I'm okay to take my vote off the table.
No,
If
you don't
I-
need to do that. She can revise it.
I wanted to make a motion to add in the condition that was offered that we specify the number of trees that we would like to see this one tree replaced with. I don't know that this property could accommodate 8 new trees. And so I would like to see the maximum number of trees, but I'm not sure that that's 8.
So I'm sorry, I'm trying to
I
understand
want
what
to
your motion
essentially
is.
add to the condition requiring the specific number of trees that we want to see replanted.
Yeah, is there a second?
Yeah.
What is the number?
I don't know what the number is.
Is there a second to that?
That's what I would like I would like it to be 8, but I know that this property's not going to be able to accommodate 8 trees. Can I say 4?
You can pick a number, any number.
I can pick any number?
Yeah.
Any number, pick a
And then
number.
And then if there's a second, we could further discuss it.
Is it 4?
I will say 4.
All
Okay.
right, I'll support that.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Denault, seconded by Commissioner Williams. Discussion. You know, my initial reaction is I think with respect to city staff, I don't know how many trees or where to put the trees, or goes back to kind of the discussion we had at a previous meeting. I just don't know anything about that topic, so I don't know how many trees to put. I think you said 4 in your revised motion, right? So I don't know, any comments from
I
you
felt
gentlemen?
1 seems sufficient to me, and that was what the property owner is granted, or has guaranteed to agreed to do.
I mean, I suspect there are a lot of trees in the tree manual, so 4 trees, specific trees, do we have specific trees identified? I thought it was just within the tree manual.
It is, it's the trees, the types of trees
Just
that
talk
are
about-
specified in the manual,
Yeah.
but the manual does not specify the number. We are required to specify the number.
I understand that, but
Okay.
I'm thinking of different trees. I'm thinking of big trees, small trees, evergreen trees, non-evergreen trees, maple trees, oak trees. I don't know. I mean, that's where I'm kind of confused.
I thought the same thing too. I think it's well-intentioned, but when you get into the details of the size of the trees and I don't know how many trees the site can fit, and, I don't want them to cut it down and then put, 4, tiny trees in the corner of the lot to meet the standards, which they probably could. I don't know. Commissioner Williams?
Okay, this discussion is a great example of why I'm voting no, which is not on this amendment, but on this proposal, which is we have staff who understand these things. We have a well-defined standard that seems very appropriate to me about tree removal. Our person with expertise has decided our standard isn't met here, and we're just deciding that for the convenience of the property owner, whatever the request is, we're going to go forward. This discussion just shows that we don't really have the expertise to be making these decisions. Our staff has the expertise, and we should be supporting our staff.
Well said.
Yeah. Okay, can we do a roll call vote on this?
The amendment?
We actually have a second. I think we need
We have
to vote. Yeah.
we have a second, so we just need to
Yes,
do a
we
vote
do.
on. This isn't on the agenda item. This is on the revised
Yeah.
motion to add the four trees, so.
So,
So we have a motion to amend the condition.
Yes.
That was earlier added by the mover of the Chapin.
Yep.
The condition would be amended to say, 4 trees shall be planted in accordance with the requirements of the East Lansing Tree Manual. Is that accurate to your motion?
Correct.
That was made by Denault, seconded by Williams. Commissioner Chapin, for the amendment, how do you vote?
no.
Commissioner Denault?
Yes.
Commissioner Overby?
No.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
No.
Okay, the amendment fails.
Okay, and can we do a roll call on the
Certainly.
item 7.2?
For the original motion to approve this request made by Overby, seconded by Chapin, with the condition to plant a tree or combination of trees in accordance with the requirements of the East Lansing Tree Manual. Commissioner Chapin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Denault?
No.
Commissioner Overby?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
No.
And Chair Sullivan?
No.
All right, and the motion fails.
Thank you. Please.
So the tree does have some large dead wood in it, and the tree does need some care. Do we have to go back through the the permit process and have the arborist look at it again? How do we process this now?
Yeah, you'd want to go back to talk to Andy Gordon, the arborist, and
Okay.
say, we need to trim this tree as needed.
Okay.
Can we make sure that we're doing that right? So just working with him on the trimming.
Okay.
will be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, that takes us on to item 7.3, consideration by the Planning Commission of proposed ordinance 1535, amendments to the zoning ordinance which define bed and breakfast.
Thank you.
Ms.
So
Farley?
this request was before you at the last meeting. We have put amendment language to define bed and breakfast. There have been some discussion about, with questions and I guess a desire to look at different regulations around the country and around different cities. Our chair was kind enough to supply us with some of those by email. I know that Alicia and Chair Sullivan had a discussion about this and changed the agenda item report accordingly to show the proposed changes. I'd like to ask Alicia to describe those changes a little bit, please.
Sure.
Thank
So
you.
one of the questions was where the number of 7 or fewer sleeping rooms came from, and it was just a determination subject to review, not a legal standard. So staff discussed with the chair that the 10 or fewer sleeping rooms, including sleeping rooms occupied by the innkeeper, which is a language directly out of the ordinance. I'm sorry, out of the
State law.
state law, thank you. Then also why the owner's room included in the figure in the local amendment, and the topics, again, were just subject for review and comment. And so the way that the state law says, the word is innkeeper, so that encompasses whomever. The question of the Wild Goose Inn, which has 6 guest rooms, so this would not preclude them. And then the length of stay discussion, we discussed back and forth from different experiences and different ordinances and came up with the language, and the chair can tell me which ordinance we got it from, but I think it was Ann Arbor.
Ann Arbor, yeah.
Maximum length of stay for any occupant of bed and breakfast operation shall be 14 days in any period of 90 consecutive days. And then also the commission had discussed the potential for a guest registry, so that was included in your language out of Grand Rapids?
Tecumseh.
Tecumseh, well, it was a 1 in 3 chance. So, so that language is directly related to that. So those were the items that I understood were questions from the last meeting that are now for discussion.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? I did have a couple clarifying comments, if I could, on how we arrived at this language. So, as you said, the 10 number was set for state law. Kind of the unique one, there was a couple different ways various ordinances address the maximum length of stay. So I thought Ann Arbor was the best bet because I imagine that they had conversations about moving the month that students are moved in, and why would you put a cap of days in that 30-day period where potentially you might have family members that want to come up more often. So extending that to 90 days and then having the 14 days within the 90-day period I thought was more appropriate. And you also have things like game day weekends. So I think we're more aligned with Ann Arbor than we are potentially with Grand Rapids and some of the other municipalities that we looked at. I'm much less wedded to the registry component. I just thought it was good language that was pulled from Tecumseh, and it seems like it's a pretty easy standard to meet. But I'm happy to discuss all this further when we have a motion on the table. Any additional comments or questions for city staff or myself, I guess?
I have a question.
Commissioner
and
Williams?
I might just be having a technical problem here. I'm not sure. So in the staff report, the items you just mentioned, I don't have any issues with those. I think that's a good outcome. But when I'm looking at the ordinance draft, the language in red doesn't, is this the language that you're asking us to approve?
No.
Okay, because it doesn't incorporate the
Correct.
language that's in the staff report, so,
Because this was for discussion,
okay,
and the ordinance that was before you before had different amendments. And so the idea was that you try and come up with a decision on these particular components that you had questions about, because it was just a conversation between the chair and staff. So the commission still has to have the conversation and decide which, if any, or all elements would then be incorporated.
Right.
so you don't have a proposed draft ordinance for us to move forward with tonight, is what you're saying?
We do. The ordinance as proposed is the original ordinance language. Should you choose to adopt it, you can also choose to amend it in accordance with the amendments that are proposed
So
in the staff report.
that's what you're asking us to do?
Yes.
Amend the existing ordinance in accordance with the recommendations in the staff report?
Correct, or
Got it.
amend the existing proposal, I should say. And to
Okay.
Alicia's point, because it was a conversation between her as staff and the chair, and not with the entire planning commission, if it had been with the entire planning commission in a public forum such as this, then we would have changed the ordinance to reflect those discussions because it wasn't with the whole commission. That's
Got
the
it.
purpose of tonight's discussion.
Got it,
Thank you.
thank you.
So we could essentially consider the revisions on page 4 in their entirety, or we could kind of piecemeal adopt them, or, discuss how to proceed once there's a motion. Any additional questions or comments? But that was a good one. I don't have any, so I think a motion's in order, so we could discuss this. If anyone's curious, it's on page 5.
Can the chair make a motion?
It's typically done, but I believe I can, so I'll just do it. I make a motion to move that the Planning Commission recommends approval by the City Council of the proposed amendment to the Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 50 of East Lansing City Code by adding a definition for bed and breakfast with the following amendments, starting on page 4 in the summary comments section. Is that sufficient? Or do we need to itemize these?
I mean, if you were to, I guess, signify that all the changes, or whichever changes,
Yeah.
if you're picking individual
I'll
ones
s-
you'd want to specify. if
I'll
you-
say with the following amendments, and then we can talk about
Okay.
revising them. So, revising this portion of the ordinance to has 10 or fewer sleeping rooms, including sleeping rooms occupied by the innkeeper, one or more of which are available for rent to transient tenants. Changing owner to innkeeper. Revising or adding a provision for the maximum length of stay for any occupant of a bed and breakfast operation to be set at 14 days in any period of 90 consecutive days. And then additionally adding a provision regarding a guest registry as outlined in the staff report on page 5. Is there a second? Second, or moved by Chair Sullivan, seconded by Commissioner Overby. Feels weird to say that in the third person, but any discussion?
I
Mr. Chapin.
compliment you on your lead here, Chair Sullivan. And as I said at the last meeting, I'm probably going to defer to you. You've tracked this quite well and have some history that I don't necessarily have, and so I'm going to defer to the majority here. So I just want to put that on record. Thank you. I think you've been a good lead here, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate your kind words. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, I believe votes in order. We just do a roll call vote on this?
Absolutely. We have a motion to approve made by Sullivan, seconded by Overby. Commissioner Chapin, how do you vote?
Yes?
Commissioner Denault?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Overby?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
And then Chair Sullivan?
Yes.
You guys have it, 5-0.
Thank you. That item is on to City Council at their meeting they decide.
At meeting, they decide.
All right, that takes us on to item number, we have no new business. That takes us on to item number 9, commissioner concerns. Is there any concerns from commissioners?
Hey, just a real quick check. I've been pretty active with the Mass Timber Committee. I'm not going to be able to make the meeting in August. It is a 50th anniversary wedding trip, and I love you guys. I love this work, but I love my wife more. I won't be here.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well deserved.
Thank
so-
you. Thank you. Yes, I'm going.
Thanks again
So
for
I'll miss that. All
wrestling
right.
our quorum tonight. You've done
Yeah.
you've done your public service.
Can I ask, just for clarification, the August 14th meeting or the August 28th?
That's correct, August 14th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most likely, the August 28th meeting will be canceled for lack of business.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
So, all right, any additional concerns? I believe a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Overby. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned at 9:23 PM.